All right. Stream should be live. Just watching an update on the YouTube stream. Sweet. It's good. All right. How's everybody doing today? You guys ready for your week 2 live session? We're going to be going over a bunch of really cool stuff this week. And then next week, which is probably my favorite week, you guys are going to be getting into some lighting and RenderMan stuff, which is going to be a pretty big deal. So before we get too deep and I start talking to myself, just want to make sure everybody can hear me. You guys can see my screen. It looks like everybody should. You can see we got a few people here already. John, Aspen. Can you guys all hear me? All right, cool. We got verification. We're good. All right, so I'm going to be doing a couple things. One of these things we're going to go over is per special request from a few different students, and it's everyone's favorite software. This stupid thing. So let's talk about OBS for a second. Yeah, this software has been giving so many people problems this month. And it's always been a little buggy, and I don't know if it's just something weird going on in the air. But yeah, this thing has been very troublesome for a lot of people. I know a couple of you guys, it's probably working perfectly and there's been no issues. And then we've had a lot of people this month with problems where recording it is saying you're out of like hard drive space. The typical black screen where it doesn't do anything, which is awesome. So I have videos in the very first activity that goes through some of the things, like the black screen issue where it doesn't record. And I do have I think there's some other problems going on where it could be either the Alienware updates haven't completely gone through or the Windows updates are still not completely caught up. So I think the black screen and the Alienware and Windows updates are all kind of linked together to be causing the same issue. But if you are fighting with OBS and you've just basically given up, and I don't blame you honestly, after multiple weeks of trying to get this to work and it still doesn't, I do want to show you guys a couple alternatives. Now, we're just using OBS just because for a while it was very stable and it seemed to work for everybody. But honestly, I don't really grade people on if it's using OBS or not. As long as we can see a recording, like we're good. So what I've done is bookmarked a couple things. I also put this in the Discord channel in our tech support channel if anyone wants the links. But I'm going to show you a couple alternatives here. And some of these I have seen people use, and it's been totally fine. This one is being used by a couple people, Bandicam. That I know works fairly well. And I think we have one or two students even this month that are maybe using it. We've had people last month that did it. Back in like November, I had a couple people using this one as well. This might be the first one I would check out if you want to try it out. Do the free download. You don't need the full version. I think the issue with Bandicam or most of these guys is that there's just a limit to how long you can record. So as long as your video doesn't go over, like, I want to say most of them cap out at like 10 or 15 minutes. It'll probably tell you when you download it, like, what the limit is for the free version. But you guys shouldn't be going over 10 minutes for almost any recording anyway. Like, even for the final presentation at the end of the month, those are typically, between, 5 to 7 minutes anyway. So I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue. But you can try that out. This is Bandicam. Flashback Recorder is another one. This one I don't know a whole lot about, but I was reading through a couple sites, just looking up reviews on everything, and this one seems to be a pretty good one that a lot of people like. Again, I don't have any personal experience with it, but you can definitely give it a shot. And the other one is, says the weirdest name, Screencast-O-Matic. So I don't know who came up with that one, but the Screencast-O-Matic, you could try this one out. And like John's talking about, there is an Xbox Game Bar. I haven't used it, but I did see that pop up, and I think I've seen someone previously use it in my class. So if you look up the Windows 10 Xbox Game Bar, that might also work. That one's built into your Windows 10 operating system. I just haven't done it yet. So try any of those out. If you don't like it, just uninstall it. If you guys ever need to uninstall something, by the way, down here, do uninstall. Not uninstall tool. That's for Autodesk. We don't want to get rid of that yet. Oh, sorry, not uninstall. Add remove programs. If you go into add remove programs, in the event that you guys have something that you've installed, like maybe you don't like Bandicam, or you get OBS working, or you just want to get rid of OBS completely and just rage quit out of it, you can find the software in the list. Whatever it is you want to uninstall, like I'm not going to actually do it, but if I want to get rid of Mari, I can just click it. It'll wipe it out. So pretty straightforward. I'll let you guys kind of play around with that. What I do want you guys to do for me, just as a favor, if any of you end up going to a different recording software, could you please give me your experience with it? Like, tell me, did you like it? Did it work well? Were there any issues? Because I kind of want to like figure out, just from people trying these out, which ones everyone honestly likes. That way, for the next class and kind of moving forward, I'm just going to start blasting that in the first activity immediately to have people just like try downloading that as a backup, just in case OBS doesn't work within the first few minutes, because it's not worth everybody fighting with it the entire month. Does that sound good to everybody? All right. Cool. All right, so now that we're beyond that, all the fun OBS stuff, let's get into the project. So what we're going to be doing here in 2.3, and I've gone through most of the 2.1s. There's still a couple people I haven't got to or need to reach out to about that one. But we're moving on to 2.3, and we're going to go over some of the stuff that is required for this particular activity. But the main kind of goal for 2.3 is really just kind of building off the camera projects you guys had last weekend. And we're going to be getting into like grouping. We're going to be making stuff with display layers. It's more like scene organization, setting up backgrounds behind characters. Display layers are super powerful. I'm going to show you that in just a little bit. So you're basically just doing this, where you're making background planes, making sure it's framed behind the character in the resolution gate, and you're doing that for both cameras and organizing a couple things. And then for the environment, we're bringing in a new prop. And then we're going to be, making sure we're positioning the prop in the right spot, putting it on the balcony. So you're going to have to use your perspective or orthographic cameras to make sure it's like sitting on the floor, where it's not intersecting, it's scaled the right way. And when we get into groups, you're going to need to find a couple groups with the telescope so you can rotate the different pieces and tilt it upwards. The grouping thing is a really big one. You guys are also going to do that for some of the doors and shutters that are going to be behind the telescope. So grouping is kind of a fun one. All right. So let's jump in here and do some of this stuff. If you guys have questions as we're going through any of this, let me know. All right, let's see, what do I got here? This might be the wrong project. All right, just give me a second. I want to grab character project real quick. We're going to grab both these guys. Actually, I can just leave right there. We'll just work off that. That's fine. All right, so let's do a real quick recap on the setting the project stuff. And actually, it was kind of nice because from watching the different videos or phone recordings that you guys did for 2.1, everyone's doing a really good job with setting the project. So let's just do a quick recap on it. Now that you guys know how to create your Maya project, and I'm going to kind of throw a question at you guys while we're going through this. What do you think the whole purpose is for us doing Maya projects? What do you got? Why do you think we're actually going through the hassle of like getting all these folders set up? Right? Why isn't it just a Maya file kind of hanging out? If you guys think you know, you can put it in the chat. And kind of talk about what you think, how you think all that stuff works, because there is a big reason why we're doing this. And it's not really just for this class. Like, I'm not just having you guys do it because it's a fun requirement for me to grade. Um, yeah, yep. So you guys are already throwing out like tons of good things here. Yeah, industry standards, organization. I completely agree. Um, So I'm sure, as you guys know, there's a lot of different softwares that kind of work with each other, right? Like you're in Maya, but you guys know that we're going to be using Photoshop. Um, you know that there's going to be other things we're going to be installing, like there's Unity and there's Nuke. You're working with a team and everyone's doing different parts of a bigger project. So eventually, all these things have to come together, right? So you're importing things inside of Maya. Maya might be sourcing external tools and plugins that another artist made. Eventually, when you make your images from Maya, like what they're called renders, that's what we're going to talk about in week 3. Where do the renders go? And so, since Maya has so many components, it's really key that we know where everything is going to go at all times. And some of these folders you guys honestly may never use. They're just there. There's nothing wrong with that. But we can use the images folder. You can see this is already jam-packed full of stuff I've done. This is where our renders and images are going to go when we're done. Assets folder is great if you want to there's like separate props that somebody modeled, like the telescope, or if you're doing a game level and you had someone else make a bunch of like really cool crates and barrels, that you want to throw into your game level you're building. You could like keep all the assets here and then reference those inside of Maya. There's even a stuff in here for sound. So eventually, when you guys do like character animation, a big part of character animation is dialogue, right? Like understanding how to animate and control the lips and mouth and facial expressions to mimic a sound bite, like someone talking. And you might want to have the sound clip in here. That way it sources properly in the Maya file. So that's kind of why we're doing all this. Organization is the big one. So we are going to first set the project. So what I want to make sure you guys do, every single time you are going to go into a project, make sure you always open Maya first. That is the first step. Get that out of the way. When Maya is open, and notice I have not double-clicked in any Maya file. I haven't opened the file yet, even from within Maya. We always want to set the project first before we ever open the Maya file. So if you get used to that, you're going to be doing fine. So we're going to go to File, Set Project. Okay, this is going to pop up. And then I'm going to quickly go to my folder where I have my projects. I also have a bunch of folders per activity, but we're going to go my projects folder, which I have kind of separated. And let's do the character one first. So you want to make sure that you're not clicking on any of the folders inside of it. So what's going to happen is if you do one of these in set, Maya is actually going to kind of freak out, and it thinks that the clips folder is the project because that's what you're selecting. And what it'll do is, because it thinks this is the project folder, it'll start generating more project folders in the clips folder. So it thinks you need a project in a project, which is not good. You want to click on just the folder that contains all the subfolders. So you just select that, hit set. And it's not very validating. Like you don't get anything that says like, oh, you did it, like you set the project. It's not going to tell you anything, but it worked. So the good way to kind of see that you did it right is as soon as you're done doing that, go to Open Scene, and you should notice that your Open menu is defaulting in the Scenes folder. Sometimes when you do this, it might be like defaulting in the Project folder, but usually it actually goes right to the Scenes folder. Either way, if it looks like it's jumping here immediately or in here, then there's a pretty good chance you did everything completely right. And you're going to keep practicing that over and over and over. It's very boring, but once you get faster at it, it only takes you like 5 or 10 seconds, and then you're done. It's out of the way. But just kind of get in the habit of trying to do that every time. Yeah, so that's a good question. So what he's talking about is if we did do it wrong, what would be the issue? And I can actually show you that real quick. We're going to mess this up on purpose. That is actually a good question. So I'm going to drop this on my desktop so I don't butcher the one I already have working. It's not really anything super critical. Like you can definitely fix it pretty easily if you do it wrong. So I'm going to set it to my desktop one, but we're going to do it wrong. Okay, so here's my desktop project, and now I'm in here, and I sort of forget what I'm doing, and so I start navigating to the Scenes folder like I'm going to click on a Maya file, right? So I'm in Scenes, and I'm like, oh, wait, I can't hit set. So let me just click on the Scenes folder, and now I'm going to hit set in here. So you'll see this is usually the sign that something's wrong, is you're going to see this little thing pop up where it's like, hey, this location doesn't contain a project definition file, which is called workspace.mel. That's a mel script file. Mel scripts, by the way, are it's kind of like Maya's. I'll show you in a second when I get out of this window. But it's kind of like Maya's native language, where you can like code stuff. But a mel script file is this thing. And so I bet you guys probably noticed this in your project folder when you did it. It kind of looks like a Maya file because it has the same little icon. It's a Maya script file. It's a little bit different. But this is what it's looking for. This thing right here is the file that sort of tells the project how to find files, how your interface is set up. It's sort of like a preferences thing. So you know how like there's preferences inside of Maya, and each file can have slightly different setups, like the way the interface is working. Excuse me. That's kind of what this is doing. So it doesn't see it because I picked the wrong folder, but we're going to do it. We're going to create a default workspace because we're rebellious. We're going to just keep moving forward. We're going to do it. It'll look like it worked. But if I go back to the folder, look in scenes, and oh, is this the right one? Oh, yeah. This actually isn't too bad in this case because it just made a workspace file. In older versions of Maya, what it would do is it would actually set up a bunch of other folders for like images, scenes. I think it would make a render data folder, but it would set up a bunch of other folders inside of here. So it would look like some of these guys are now duplicated in the scenes folder. So they must have changed something recently, or maybe I just did it slightly differently because I didn't make those, but this guy is still here. But either way, once you go in your scenes folder, if you notice that something's wrong, like I don't need this, you can just go in there and delete it, delete any folders that shouldn't be there. The only thing that's really in the scenes folder are your Maya files. I don't know what that is, and the edits folder. If you see anything else in there, you can just delete that out of there. It's honestly pretty easy to fix, but you guys probably won't run into that issue too often. All right, let's get rid of that. Okay. So let's go back here and set the project one more time to the correct location. But if you guys have any questions about it, you can always shoot me a message and I'll try to have a one-on-one with you to explain that in a bit more detail. But it's honestly really easy to set up. All right, set it and open up the cam. And I really hope the cameras are in here. And they're not. Oh my goodness, I keep forgetting this every month. Hold please. We're going to blow through this thing real quick. All right. Let's do this lightning speed. We are going to line up our cameras with incredible haste. Wow, that's not the resolution I wanted. Okay, resolution gate. Okay, good enough. And again, we'll do our next camera. Boom. I need to save the scene this time because I keep forgetting to do this every month I do this lecture. All right, angled, back it up, alt right, move in. Let's turn on the resolution gate. And I don't have the reference in front of me, so I'm going to kind of guess here. I think it's something pretty close to that. That's probably close enough. Lock, and we're good. Well, we just did 1.3. So there we go. Cameras are all set. And this time, I'll actually save it because I keep forgetting to do that. So let's call this character cam. All right. Here's where you guys start. Okay, so in the documentation, it wants you to start by opening this up. So you set your project, which we did. We open up the camera file, so it's right where you left off. And if you guys still need to make adjustments to your cameras, definitely, based on my critique, do that before you get too far with the project on the weekend. But what we need to do is this stuff. We need to back up here and try to set up a few things with background. So we're going to make a polyplane. We're just going to put it behind the head. We're going to rename it. I'll probably just do this for one camera today so we can move on to the environment project. We're going to make a display layer, talk about how those work. and then you guys are going to repeat that for the other camera. So we need a different background per camera. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, what I think you guys are probably going to want to do is on the left side, use that second button from the top, which is the split perspective view. So we have two different viewports. And we're going to make this, I'll do the angled one, I think, instead of the front. Okay, and I'm going to make this one perspective. So remember, at the panels menu at the top, you can change out to any camera you want. Any of the ones you've created or perspective. If you do this, it's just going to make another perspective camera, but you don't need to do that. So we're just going to use those three right there. So what we've got is I can move around and edit in here, and I'm going to watch what happens when I look through my camera. So I first need to make a polyplane. And where is that? Well, you guys remember the poly modeling shelf. We have all these buttons right here, right? We can click it in this section. You guys may also remember that they're also located right here. There's a few other ones too that don't appear on the shelf that you can use. So I could go in here, I could hit plane. Now I don't see it, but you can see that there's something in the outliner when I did that. So it did make the plane. Where is it? What's our trick we can use to find it? Remember the F key that I've talked about a little bit? I did that last week where the F will kind of like focus the camera on whatever you're selecting. So if you click on the plane and hit F, you'll notice it zooms into it. And I can see it, but where are we? Let me back up. It's in the stand. So it's just because, again, everything is in the stand. So if I use W, we start going through our different transform tools like you guys have done. Remember, Q is selection, W, E, R. W is translate. And I can just simply click on any of these arrows and just slide it back, and then we can see it. Now, obviously, it's very tiny. It's not going to be a very good background, but if I move it up and kind of slide it over, eventually you can sort of see it even in the other camera, like it's behind the head. And I do want to start having you guys think about some shortcuts on how we can do this a bit faster. And I do like the shelf. The shelf is great. But there's going to be a lot of cases where you guys are going to try to get more efficient. And it's good to learn shelf buttons and all the menus first, because you kind of have to know where things are located before you start getting into like all these little quicker methods to do it. But I want to show you the shift right-click menu. So I've talked to a lot of people individually about this. How many of you guys know about shift right-click? Like these weird little like marking menus that pop up when you start shift right-clicking on things. Has anyone actually used this yet this month? Where depending on how you're selecting something, shift right-click does a bunch of weird things. But it's very powerful if you have used it. Yeah. All right. So this is going to hurt some people's heads here in a little bit. And don't feel like you have to do it. There's no pressure. I'm not grading anyone on doing this. But what shift right-click does is it's called a marking menu. And marking menus are these shortcuts. And the way this thing works is if I don't have anything selected, if I just am out here in the middle of nowhere, and if I do shift right-click, I'm holding both buttons down, this pops up. And you can see we have a bunch of the polygon primitives, right? I have a bunch of other ones down here that are not the sort of the easy, simple ones that we saw on the list, like the super ellipse. That's fun. But that menu changes depending on what you're selecting. So for example, if I had the head selected, so this is me selecting an object. Now if I do shift right click again, look what happened. It's different. I'm doing the exact same hotkeys, shift right click, completely different result. I got the sculpt tool, I got the multi-cut, insert. These are modeling tools. So because I'm selecting an object, it thinks I'm trying to model something, like change the shape of the object. So for example, with this, like if I zoom in really close to some of these little, these are faces, by the way, all these little guys. If I shift right click, if I do the sculpt tool, this is going to be kind of weird. Here's 3D sculpting. If I'm holding B and dragging to bring the brush size down. You're going to learn, don't worry about memorizing any of this. You'll get more of this later. I don't know what I'm doing. That looks very phallic, but we are sculpting a nose on the side of the stand. And I'm not changing any of the settings, so the opacity of the brush is probably cranked through the roof, and it's just yanking the surface apart. But we're sculpting on it. So let me do Control Z and back up. I'm just going to hit Q to go back to selection tool. Now it's interesting too because when you start getting into component selections, so we're going to get in close again. Remember, if you hold down right mouse button, you've seen this probably before. This is another marking menu, but right mouse button by itself is how you can hop between component selections. So usually you guys are in something called object mode. This is what we're seeing right now. This is object selection. But if you hold down right mouse button and go to edge, see how like it's like now wants me to select the edges, like the lines between the objects. And you can do a bunch of really interesting things with this. You could be like, all right, I'm in edge mode. I'm going to, maybe this is too dense. It's a really dense mesh for the stand. I could go in there and start double clicking. I'm just holding shift and double clicking on edges and see how it's running. This is what's called an edge loop. I'm running an edge loop, but because I'm in edge mode, if I shift right click, it's a completely different set of tools. Now it's like, oh, you're in edge mode. Well, these are probably the things you want to do with edges. You want to delete the edge. You want to bevel the edge or extrude the edge. This creasing, bridging. If I do delete edge, it gets rid of the edges. It should in a second. There we go. They're gone. You can see that little gap where I removed everything. And I could even do it again with faces. Here's face. So a trick with face mode, I'm going to click and shift, double click. This is kind of like what you saw with edges where I did the double click and it ran what's called an edge loop. This is a face loop. So that's me click and holding shift and just double tapping to the one next to it. And Maya knows you're trying to run like a loop of the face selections. And with this, I could be like, all right, shift right click. It's another set of things I could do because now I'm in face selection mode. So you can see this menu keeps changing. And now I can be like, extrude face. Let's see what that does. Let's give it a second. There's a lot of faces I'm doing it on at once, so Maya is like trying to figure out what I'm trying to do. And I can see this little manipulator, and if I just pull this out, hopefully it doesn't freak out on me. You can do it. I'm extruding the face. We're making this little like kind of a beveled edge to the stand where it kind of pops out like a lip. So we're modeling right now. We're adding detail by using all these little marking menu tools. And it gets pretty deep. You have a whole class or a couple classes that will talk about modeling. But I just wanted to show you that. The reason I'm doing that, by the way, is because when you start to make these primitive shapes, like if you know you need a polyplane, don't feel like you always need to go up here and look through the menu to find it. You can use shift right click and simply just like shift right, gesture up to the top left, plane, and it's done. So it kind of saves you the hassle of like digging through these menus once you get a lot more comfortable with what the shortcuts are. So I would encourage you guys to practice it. And by the way, if you guys really want to practice modeling tools, I know a lot of you guys are probably here because you want to be a modeler. That's probably the most popular, discipline out of the whole 3D pipeline. There's a couple really good modeling tutorials for beginners back in the first activity. Like there's a can, like a soda bottle. I think there might be, I don't know if I have the barrel one in there still, but there's a couple really good ones you can use and just try to follow along if you want to get more comfortable doing some of the things we were just talking about right here. But let's jump into what we have to do. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. We're going to move this up. Oh yeah, the mouse, that's right. I totally forgot about that guy. Yep. We're going to move this up, and I want to have this be the background. So what I'm going to do is just slide it over, and you can kind of see where it is in the other camera. If I wanted to, I could even grab it here in the middle and just kind of center it. That's fine. So I'm centering it. Now the issue is, of course, it's not a very good background because it's laying flat facing up. So we're going to use E, and I'm just going to rotate it this way first. And I can use the channel box to help me out because when you rotate it, you can kind of see what it's doing. And I'm going to put this to 90 degrees so it's just standing perfectly upright because you can type in numbers here. And then we're going to use rotate Z. I just want to turn it towards the camera. Now, you could leave it like this and just simply make it bigger. So if I go to this and use R and scale it, like that's fine, but see how it's kind of slanted, right? Just based on the angle the camera's looking at it, this isn't really facing towards the camera. So you could still do it. I just think it might look better if we had the background facing towards where we're looking from. So I'm going to use E. We're going to turn it. And now all I have to do is R, maybe grab the bottom, scale it up. And I'm not expecting you guys to get it perfect where it's like just barely beyond the resolution gate. You can go a little bit farther beyond it, but all I'm looking for is does it at least fill that resolution gate detail with the one background. And it does. Like, this is pretty much in the right spot. And then we'd name it, I think it's called, like BG front, I think. Front geo, something like that. You'll see it in the documentation, like background front. Or, wow, this is not front. This is angled. Sorry, wrong camera. Background angled. Now, when you guys position it, the distance from the character, it doesn't really matter for this turn-in, because when I grade it, I don't care how far away it is, because there's no way you would know where to put it in distance. But thinking ahead to your lighting activity that's coming up at the in week 4 for this one, eventually you will be setting up lights around the character to do like different types of really classic lighting setups. If this is really close and you've done this, you're going to have a hell of a time getting the lights working, because the issue is that since it is so close to the object, you can't put a light behind the head to actually do anything. Like, you're going to put a light back here because you want to have a light come from behind the head to like create this really cool accent, like a rim light or backlighting, and you're going to realize like, oh crap, I can't even do that because it's being blocked by the wall. So we're going to back it up. So just give it like something like this is totally fine. Once you get to the lighting activity, you can play around with the distance, and that'll kind of affect how the lights work. But this is what we have right here is totally acceptable. Now, once you get to this point and you've set up your background, what we want to do, character BG front and character BG angled, yep. We need to make the display layer. So I kind of skipped over that. Create a display layer for the object and repeat it for the other one. So I jumped ahead to positioning it. Let's just do the display layer real quick. These are awesome. And I'm going to show you why these are really powerful in the next project, actually. So display layers are down here, right? They're in the channel box. So if you're in the attribute editor, you can't see it. You'll notice it says channel box and layer editor. The layer editor is this thing down here. You have display and animation layers. We're really just focusing on this guy. Eventually, you're going to get more info on that. So display layers, currently there are none in the scene. The way they work is you have 4 buttons here. These simply change the order of the layers, which we don't have any yet. This is create an empty layer. This is make a layer with a selected object. So if I do the empty layer, this is what it looks like. This is kind of like you in Photoshop, just making an empty layer. There's really nothing to it. I can double click, I can change colors. It's not really going to do anything because there's nothing on the layer. And you can also rename it to whatever you want. But you can also add stuff to layers. So if I make it with an empty layer, and there's a little V button on the left, V stands for visibility. And there's a bunch of other ones too. For P, there's a one next to it for a template, render. Don't worry about these guys, just leave them at P and leave that one empty. This is the only button you have to worry about, V, visibility. But I want to add something to the layer. So if I did like the character's head, for example, I'm selecting something. If I right click on the layer, you can see it says, oh, you can add this selection to the layer. So I'm going to click it. And it's now added that to the display layer. There's actually a way to see that. Because if you scroll down in the channel box past all this stuff, see how there's an input? See how this, well, that's history, but this doesn't have that like layer 1 input. This doesn't have it. That has history when I was doing the extrusion and the delete edge stuff. But this right here is showing us some type of connection going on with this to something called layer 1. That's that guy. So it actually is on the layer. And if you turn the V button off, see, we're just controlling visibility very quickly. It's kind of like the same thing as you over here clicking on an object and hitting H for hide and unhide. It's very similar. But there's a reason why we want to do these through display layers in some situations. Now I'm going to delete this, so let's delete the layer. Let's do it a little bit quicker. So we're going to click on the background, and instead of me making the empty layer and then assigning something to the empty layer, if you know this is what should be on the layer, hit the button on the right. This is make a layer with the selection. You hit it, it looks the same, but if I hit V, it's already working. That's probably going to be the method you guys like. But it is very easy to add and remove stuff as long as you understand how you can right click and it'll change based on what you're selecting. So I'm going to double click and we're going to call this BG angled layer. And we'll pick a fun color. We'll do, I don't know, we'll do this guy on the end. So I'm picking a color, and you're not going to see the color until you go to wireframe. As soon as you go into wireframe mode, which is 4, it's also that button right there at the top. And you guys all remember this from the first week, 4 and 5. It'll actually change the color of the wireframes. So some people actually used these, honestly, just for organization, where they try color coding different parts of the scene to help them like visually break stuff up. So much larger environments that could be pretty helpful for some organization. Or you just like pretty colors. And if you want to color your stuff, you can totally do that. And there we go. Do you guys have any questions about display layers? I mean, they really are this easy. You set it up, and you would have to do the same thing for the front cam. So see how with the front camera, this background clearly doesn't work? So I need you guys to make a new polyplane. You're going to move it so it looks like a background for this camera. Make a display layer, name it. You can color code it if you want. But the reason we're doing that is because now, depending on which camera you're looking through, you're going to be able to turn on the appropriate background that goes with it. So if we're using the angled camera and we're eventually going to do an image, turn this one on. If you decide later on you're going to use the front camera for a different type of shot, I don't have it here, but you turn on the display layer for the front background, and then that would pop up behind the head. So you can kind of toggle them on and off pretty quickly. It's really easy stuff. Those are display layers. How you guys feeling about that? Probably not too bad. And I have a bunch of videos that go into this and the activity. You can check that out and listen to me talk about it in way more detail. Okay. Cool. Let's, if no questions, we're going to move on to the environment. So we're moving on to a different project, right? We're in the character project, so it's time for us to set our project to a new location, because those are two completely different projects. I'm not going to save this in this case. As beautiful as a job as I did, we're not going to worry about that. So we're going to do File, Set Project. We're going to do the environment one this time. Set, Open. See how it's already changed the environment scene folder? Beautiful. Let's go to Cam, and please don't disappoint me. Are there cameras here? There are. Incredible. Why do I have primitives here? What are these? Oh, I don't know what I was doing. Apparently at some point I decided I'm making a bunch of primitive shapes. Well, that's fun. All right, let's delete that. And let me just quickly save this as a new one. So, okay. And we'll look through one of the cameras just so you can kind of see this update. So this is one of the cameras I had set up for mine as an example. I don't think you guys saw this one yet. I have it in my lighting activity later in the month. That's the end of week 3. I hope they're not upside down. If it does make you feel better, John, I can totally turn them upside down. So that way we're on the same page here. What he's talking about, by the way, I'm going to put you onto the spot here, John. Sorry, not sorry. For one of his projects, I opened it up, and his camera icon, I'll show you what it looked like. Normally when I see your guys' cameras, it looks like that. And I can kind of tell, like, oh, it's looking at the object. That's going to be good. His was doing this. And, oh, wow, that's wonderful. Well, that's not good. And so it actually looked like it was looking at the geometry, but the camera was like inverted and facing backwards. And it's actually kind of interesting because it's something I never really thought to talk to you guys about. But when you're scaling something, because I know a lot of you guys are scaling to make the icons bigger, I don't think I told you guys that you can actually scale inversely. So if you go the other direction, watch that icon, it'll pop back, and it looks like it's still a camera icon. It doesn't really seem to change much. I mean, the black color should be a red sign. Something's not good. But the negative scale means it is essentially flipped and inverted the entire way the camera works. I've never tried rendering and creating an image with an inverted camera, and I don't think I'm going to start today. But don't do that. All All right, let's undo all that stuff. So there we go. There's inverting your camera. Remind me in week 3. I know you're just like, yes, do it. Come to the dark side. Um, oh, my stream's going crazy. Come on, stream. Okay, we're back. That might have buffered weird for you guys there for a second. All right, so for this one, yeah, I saw it kind of freak out on my end. We're back in business. Let's go to the environment. Let's hop to this guy. We're kind of skipping past all this. So this one's kind of cool. So you guys know how you have the telescope. That's in your assets folder. Everyone actually did a really good job with that. And we're going to bring it to the scene. So we're going to import something. And we're going to move it on the balcony, talk about some different transform tools to do that. And we're going to get into grouping. And grouping is awesome. Another really good way to organize stuff. And it allows us to move multiple objects at once. And I'll probably let you guys figure out the shutters. But let's jump in here. Now, real quick, I do want to show you one thing before we get into grouping, kind of like on the topic of display layers. So you know how before when I was talking about this that it was very similar to like hitting H, like hiding and unhiding something. But that's not really why I use display layers. There's a bigger reason why I like to use it, is because it is a shortcut to select multiple things at once. So check this out. Here's how I use display layers. I'm going to zoom in, and I want you to notice that we have a bunch of like pretty simple little geometry pieces here for like all these little bolts and things that kind of keep the door, on its hinge and working. And I can find all this stuff if I start digging through here. What I'm going to do, though, is click, and I'm going to hold Shift. I'm just clicking on a couple things. Just going to select all this stuff, and we're going to come down here, holding Shift. I'm just single-clicking to select a bunch of things. You can see how tedious this is. We're going to come over here, do the same thing. Just bear with me for 1 second. Oops. Come on, you can do it, Jared. There we go. Down here. And there's a bunch of these guys on the inside. This is just for the door. The shutters on the inside have the same thing. Okay. So you can tell I'm doing something super tedious, right? Like I'm clicking all these pieces. Now imagine if you had to start editing these objects. Like eventually you're going to start making materials in the second shading and lighting class, where I'm going to tell you guys to put like these really cool metal materials, like a black steel on those guys. Well, it's kind of a pain to do that because you have to like single click through all these just to do anything, to apply something to everything at once. But if I were to make a display layer with these guys, I'm not doing it for the visibility, although that's cool too. I'm doing it because it's now a shortcut to select everything very quickly. So now by me simply right clicking on that layer that I just built for all these, if I right click, look what shows up. Select objects, boom. I selected everything that goes with this. And you can add stuff to it. So if I knew in the future I was going to be needing to reference and select these guys again later, you can totally add these to the layer. I can start going through, selecting stuff. I'll just kind of stop there, right click, add. And now if I ever have to do something with those layer, right click, select, I've automatically selected, a couple dozen pieces with the click of a button. So in bigger projects, that is so important because there's a lot of cases where you are trying to move multiple things or edit multiple things at once, and this is a massive time saver just by using that little selection thing. Yes, really, really useful. Any of you guys that decide you want to get into like environment modeling, where you're dealing with these massive sets, that is going to be a really powerful trick and tool in your toolbox. So I'm just going to right click and delete that, but you'll kind of remember this because in the second shading and lighting class, we're totally going to use that in one of the activities. All right, let's bring in the telescope. So things look good. I've got this camera. I don't know where the other one is. Oh, I probably built this for widescreen. We're not going to worry about that. We'll just stick with this one. So we're going to do File, and I'm going to do Import. So File, Import. Now, Open Scene is how you open your Maya file. Import is when you're already in a file and you want to bring something else into it. So I'm going to import, and I'm looking for the telescope, which apparently is totally not in there. I am woefully unprepared for this, apparently. I swear I've done this before, guys. Nope. Where are you, Mr. Telescope? Ah, there it is. So let me just bring that and put it at the right location this time. So that thing I told you guys to do, I totally didn't do. So it's do as I say, not as I do. All right, let's do it again. File, import. We're going to back up, assets folder. Hey, there's the telescope. Good job, Jared. We're going to hit import, continue, and the telescope's in here. So now, we can't see it, but you can see in the outliner, something has appeared. There it is. If you keep turning the camera, you will eventually see it. Now, one thing I want you guys to be aware of, and I've tried to mention this to as many people as possible in my video critique, a bunch of you, and I think it's because of the Maya file I gave you, are seeing this on the backside. If you are seeing black through any of your cameras, mainly perspective, and you're trying to see into the interior, at the top of your viewport, go to shading and turn that guy on right there, back face culling. That is what it should look like. I don't know why it's resetting for some people, but if it's black, go to back face culling, it'll fix it. It's just because this wall is single-sided, and I modeled it so you could see through it, whereas the front wall, you can see, has a thickness. You're not supposed to see through it. That's something you'll learn about back face culling when you get to your modeling classes. Yep. I'm kind of curious too, if you guys ever run into that, by the way, in a game before, even though if you may have never realized what it was called, but if you ever ended up in a weird part of a level where you're like stuck in a wall or behind something that's clearly off the map and it looks like you're looking through the side of a building. It's actually happened to me recently when I was playing Red Dead Redemption 2 online. I got stuck in one of the towns and I got wedged in between a couple of buildings and it looked like I was looking through the floor, and that was back face culling. There's our telescope. So it's right here. We're going to hit W, and I just want to simply move it out, and we're going to try to put it on the balcony. So we're going to move it over. Oh, yeah, I would not be surprised about that. Yeah, the garage is in Grand Theft Auto. I could totally see that doing that. Yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2 is a beautiful game. I'm still playing it a little bit. It's been pretty buggy recently. I don't know what's going on with their servers, but it feels like I can't find like an animal to hunt anywhere, like roaming the plains looking at nothing. No birds, no deer. How can I be a cowboy if I can't shoot the animals? We got this thing open, and you can tell right off the bat, even though we're putting it on the balcony, this thing is massive. Just some of it kind of comes down to common sense. Yep, I did finish the story. I need to go back and play it though. It's an amazing story. The single player for Red Dead Redemption 2 is incredible. It'll get you right in the feels. So see how huge this thing is? Now just imagine you're a person. Like you can see the latch. So I mean, just imagine, okay, this is where your hand is to open the door. Imagine walking outside and just seeing this big bad boy. Well, that's a little bit intimidating. So the telescope is huge. So we need to make sure this is scaled down to something a bit more reasonable. So I'm going to hit R. And now this is where we want to be really careful about how we scale something. Remember, there's a bunch of buttons here. If you start doing this, because you can do this, right? I'm just scaling it down. What is happening to the telescope when I'm doing it this way? See how it's like doing this weird stuff? It's smaller, but you can tell like this just doesn't look good. Like I've broken the proportions of the telescope, right? And that's because we're using individual scale handles on the tool. The scale is all messed up. It's got different values for each one of these guys. So I really want to make sure that we're doing what's called a uniform scale. All uniform scale means is that the scale values are the same. So I'm going to reset this back to 1, which is default. We're going to hit R. This time, we're going to click in the middle and drag. And see how uniform scale keeps all those the same? It's even. We're going to bring it down. And I don't really know what the right answer is necessarily because I don't have a person in here standing next to it. But I think somewhere around here feels like kind of reasonable, which is close to 0.6. So somewhere around like 0.6, you could even type that in. It's probably a pretty good spot to be. Um, Now, the other thing you want to look at is, even though it looks like it's sitting on the floor, when I hit W, move it up and down and watch the legs. See how it was actually going through the floor? You can see there's more there. So it's intersecting. And you want to bring it up. Now be careful, because sometimes you'll move it up and it'll look like it's in the right spot. That's one of the tricky things about working with Maya, is because it has such a very basic gray viewport. It's sometimes hard to understand the depth of something. Like, you don't understand how close objects are together. You don't get those like same kind of visual clues that we get in real life. One thing you could do is, if this button right here is turned on, this is called ambient occlusion. See how it adds contact shadows? If you keep moving it down and really get the camera close to the floor, you will see the shadows appear. Right there they are. See a little shadow forming? It's a way to kind of get a better idea if you're close to contacting the ground and not just floating above it. You can get really close. I just want you guys to get to the point where it's just barely sitting on the ground. And I can get very, very close. Like right there. Looks pretty good. Kind of looking at this guy in the back. Like, that feels about right. Right. Good. So it's in a pretty good spot. So I've got it now sitting where it needs to be. The scale feels pretty good. Really the last trick we have to figure out here is, how do we rotate it? Now, let's go over what not to do before we show you the right answer. Now, the whole top part right here, this should tilt upwards. You can click on multiple pieces, by the way. You can totally do this. I'm just going to hold Shift. So I'm holding Shift and clicking is allowing me to select multiple pieces. Now I'm selecting what looks to be the top of the telescope. I'm going to use E. So E, and I'm going to rotate. We're going to tilt it up. Doesn't that look great? So what happened? You have to remember, when you're selecting multiple pieces and when you rotate them, even though it looks like there's a rotation handle back here, you are actually rotating each separate piece individually. They're all rotating based on their own center of pivot, doing the same angle. So it looks terrible. Let's undo it. This is why we have groups. So you know how I moved the whole telescope out in one piece? It's a group. The whole environment is already in a group. We're going to click. Let's open up the group with plus. Just click on any. So, oh, by the way, groups, if you hit plus, you can expand it and see what's in the group. So there's a group in a group. There's another group in a group. So there's lots of groups stacked together. But if you click on the top piece, you can sort of see where this is located, because it'll kind of highlight where this is. So it's in the telescope master group. It's in the telescope turn group. Let's hit that plus. It's in the telescope tilt group. There it is. That's the piece of geometry. It's buried in like 3 different groups. And the reason for that is because now with the tilt group, if I find that right group, if I hit E, you'll notice that notice when I hit E, by the way, that the rotation handle, like this little icon right here for rotating, look where it's focused. See how it's in this one little section right here? Because that's where it's now pivoting from. So I moved this pivot point here to make sure when you rotate it, it looks like it's pivoting on the right axis right here. So you're just going to tilt it up. Now you want to be careful. You don't want to do this or that or any of the like free rotation. Like, that just does not feel good. So this is only meant to tilt, with rotate X. And you can also just type in a number there if you want. Now I'm going to undo it. I'll show you the most common problem with this. And because you guys are all here with me, I'm expecting nobody to have this issue. This is actually going to be a really good way for me to see who watched the live session the whole way through. What you do not want to do is, everybody will find the turn group. This is the first one everyone sees. They open up the big group. They're like, turn group. I did it. We found the answer. E. We're going to tilt it up. Nailed it. What could be wrong? What I do when I see this is I immediately zoom in and I take a screenshot of that right there. This is the problem if you do it with the turn group. You have now broken the connection. See how it's like it's intersecting real weird? It shouldn't be pivoting this way here. This is not where it's tilting upwards from. Hence why it's called turn group. not tilt group. Tilt group is for tilting, turn group is for turning. So I set these up in a very particular way because turn group, if you rotate it, see how it's pivoting right there, just like it should be in real life. And it's really kind of interesting because, again, like I think with the whole thing with 3D and Maya is it feels like this very big mysterious software. Like I'll never understand how anything works. Like how do I construct stuff? And if you really just if you're someone who likes to watch those like how it's made videos, like how things are built, how they're constructed, how buildings are put together, if you actually do more of that stuff, you will be able to do all this stuff in Maya. Like you build it in Maya like it's built in real life. So if you're into that type of stuff, you are going to love using Maya. And I really like that knowing that too because it's kind of comforting because you don't have to guess. You just look up like, oh, how did they put this concrete skyrise together? You can find some cool blueprints and see how they're all connected, and you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. I'm just going to do that in Maya. But we're going to rotate it. Now, because my camera is looking at the front, I think you guys would agree. Doesn't that kind of seem like a pretty boring angle for the telescope? Like, it's looking right at the camera. It's not very dynamic. So let's just fix this a little bit. I'm going to click on the group, W. I'm going to move it over, and looking at the camera, I'm going to try to get mine centered because I just like it looking like it's centered right now. It looks a little bit more interesting to me. I'm going to click on the turn group, E. We're going to turn it. So I now get a really nice angle like with the silhouette. And depending on where your cameras are at, you're going to probably do something similar to this where you just want to get a really cool little silhouette and shape from the telescope. Now to tilt it, then I go to the tilt group, rotate, go up, boom, incredible. And now we got our guy sitting down here looking through the telescope up towards the stars or whatever this guy would be doing, right? He can now see through it, and it's all built properly. So that's how groups work. Now, you guys aren't actually making groups. I do want to show you how to do that super quick in case you're curious how groups work. I have a bunch of videos that talk about it. And you're also doing the doors and shutters, by the way. These also have groups where you can just once you find them in here, you can just simply open and close them as needed. Yeah, that's not the most exciting shot of space, right? Like, oh, look at, I wonder if we can see Saturn. Oh, it's all gray. Well, this is depressing. But there actually is a shortcut, by the way, to find all the different groups. So if I were to click on this and E, see how this is like not opening the way it should? Watch this. If I click on that and hit the up arrow on my keyboard, see what it just did? Let me show you what that's doing. This is how I typically get to my groups quicker because I hate digging through the outliner. So here, I'm just digging all the way down so you can see the geometry I'm clicking on. When I hit the up arrow, watch this and watch the viewport. This is me clicking on the door, hitting up. It goes up in the hierarchy. So it says, okay, you want to go up one directory. Well, this is the group that object's in. Hit up, boom, it goes to the parent hierarchy. If I hit up again, it should jump to this guy. Yep, there's the whole window master group. And if I do up again, it'll probably do everything. So up and down kind of works, but it doesn't really know which one to go down to because there's a lot of them. But there you go. If you guys ever want to play around with groups and just for the practice, it's pretty easy. Let me just like set up a bunch of primitives real quick, and then we'll get you guys out of here. So let's say we have, we'll do like a stack of a few simple shapes here. So I have this. We'll throw that guy in the top. Come on, computer. There we go. Do that. And we'll do this. And maybe we'll do like a polyplane and bring this out so it's sitting on something. Hit F, and we'll just move that down like that. So we'll pretend like this is maybe, I don't know what the heck this even is. A really cheap looking cake from maybe like Sims 1 or Sims 2. Oh, duplicate, it's right up here. It's going to be Control D. So if you ever want to duplicate something, click on whatever you want. It could be an object, it could be a group. Control D, and you can then just move it over, and you've got your duplicate. And one thing too, I'll show you is kind of cool, real quick, is you know how I was showing you guys over here, like how I had the group's pivot points adjusted, so I could rotate it on these different little, very specific points on the model. If I wanted to scale this thing, see how when I scale it, it's scaling to the middle, and you get this gap. What if you wanted to scale it, but scale it so it stays on the ground? Here's our pro tip for the day. Check this out. I'm going to hit 4 because I want you to go to wireframe so you can see through it. Here we go. We're going to use D. D, I think I might have showed you this last week maybe. D is the adjust the pivot point hotkey. D. I'm hitting W too, by the way. W for transform, but I'm holding D. Then I'm going to hold V for vert snapping the pivot point. And I'm just going to click on that little circle and drag down and see how it snaps. It was trying to snap to the vertices of an object. Snap. See how I just moved the manipulator? The object didn't move. I'm moving the manipulator. That's the pivot point. That's like what it thinks the center of the object is. And when I scale now, look what happens. Now it scales and it's still on the ground. Presto. Incredible. All right. So the grouping thing, if you want to keep all these together, like maybe pretend this is some table with a bunch of weird props or incredibly low poly cake, I guess. Yeah, so V, yeah, I think you guys get it. Yep. So V is your vert snapping. That's all V stands for, by the way, is vert snap. And when I'm holding D, that means I'm vert snapping the pivot point. So D is adjusting the pivot point. V is vert snapping. Them collectively is me vert snapping a pivot point. But you can also use V by itself. If I just like don't even use D, just hold V, like it'll vert snap the object to anything. It's trying to vert snap to the ground, the other objects. It's all over the place. But with this, if I want to group it, I can just simply select them. I can drag through them in the outliner, and grouping is right there, Control G, so kind of by the duplicate. So if we do Control G for group, boom, items grouped successfully. Thanks, Maya. You can see it looks just like these guys. We can name it. We'll call it table and crappy cake group, question mark? Whatever this is. So we have it there. There's our group. You can open it up. You can rename these guys. And if I click on the group and hit W, now notice how the pivot point's messed up, right? Because the group's pivot point is still at the center of the world. So center pivot is right there. Click. And I can obviously center the pivot to whatever I wanted. So if I wanted the pivot point to be the corner here, I could do that. I could do like D, V, move the pivot point for the group over here. And now if I rotate it, the whole group is pivoting on that point. Yeah, and it all scales at once too. Yep, the whole thing is one piece. You can scale, rotate. If I flip them, I can do this. They're all together. This is exactly how I set up the telescope. Like before, you know, I did the same thing we're doing here on this guy after I built it. I just went through and started setting up groups to kind of keep it all together. I think even the legs have a group. Yeah, even those, you don't need to mess with them, but those also kick out. This is a little more complicated because I don't have the chain set up dynamically, so you can see it kind of breaks when the chain, because it's not updating with it. But yeah, those are also in groups. And you can ungroup pretty easily too. You can click, ungroup, and it gets rid of the group, and they're back as individual objects. Oh, totally, yeah. Yeah, it's great for doing trees. We actually have another project we're working on the side where we're doing like a massive oak tree, and that's using a lot of groups. We have all these different clusters of leaves grouped together, and we're doing this thing called instancing, where we're copying those guys around. And instancing is pretty interesting too if you've never seen that before. You know how we did the duplicate thing where it made like another version of an object? I know I'm getting carried away here. I swear this is the last thing. Let me show you instancing real fast. Oh, that's all messed up. That's all right. So I'm going to duplicate special, and we're going to make, I'm just going to the options. So anytime you see a tool with a little box next to it, that means there's options. You can click on it and end up in the settings for it. I'm going to make a instance of this and duplicate it. Let me just move it over so you can see this. It should have worked. Did it do it? This might have actually not. Oh, it did work. Okay. Yeah, see how when I'm like, I did an instance duplicate, see how that other thing has these little vertices lighting up over there? If you get into modeling, look what it's doing. It's updating on the instance. So this is a kind of an interesting way where you can build entire sets very quickly. So like if I wanted to, let's say, what I should have done for this actually is built one set of windows to instance it. So if I was still modeling like the window frame for this, if I had instanced the object as I was building it into the other openings over here in the wall, as I model it, it will automatically update over here. So I don't have to keep like adjust it, duplicate it, move it over, then go back and tweak it. Like, oh crap, I have to replace this one again and duplicate it, move it over. So it's a really cool way to like see one object, filter into and adjust other objects around it. And if you're just curious about that again, that is under duplicate special. It is called an instance. So an instance means it is another version of the same object. They're kind of feeding off each other. Pretty cool stuff. So I'm pretty excited for you guys to get to the modeling class because you're going to learn about all those different tools there. But I think that's pretty much it. I don't think there's anything else I really need to go over with you guys. I mean, really all you're turning in at the end of the day, you're still turning in the 2 Maya files, not the full project. I know you guys have that set up. I'm not worried about the project folders. You're turning in the 2 Maya files, and within those files, I'm grading to see, are the backgrounds set up? Are they on display layers? Did you name things properly? And with this one, with the environment, where's the telescope? Is it positioned in the right way? Did you scale it? And probably more importantly, did you figure out how to rotate all the groups? That's typically the one that people get hung up on. And then you turn it in, and I check it out. But if you guys are watching this thing and participating, you will probably nail this one. It's pretty good. And then we finally get to the fun stuff next week where we get into lighting. Week 3 is the one I've been waiting for. This is just all the setup before you can finally get to making the pretty images. We're so close. But thanks, guys. Appreciate everybody hanging out for the meeting. Like usual, I'm going to post a link to you guys tomorrow morning when I get back at work, and I'll try to catch up with you guys later. And again, if you're using a different recording software, please let me know how it works. I'd love to get some feedback on that. That way I can start putting that information out to everybody else and give them a good recommendation for a software that you guys have used and you think works well. All right, I'll talk to you later, guys.